Hello and welcome to a new Google Sheets tutorial in Practical Sheets. Today I'm going to show you how to do advanced sequences of numbers, for example, to do references to your products, to your students, or things like that. I'm going to show you what we're going to do. Without using the sequence function, which we have used in the past, I'm going to show you a couple of new exciting functions, matrix type, array formula type functions that Sheets has for us, where we could do sequences, order sequence, very similar to the sequence function, or you could do sequences where they start over, for example, for running totals or for categories that are ordered. And we're going to take these functions to the next level and do unordered sequences. For example, if you have different categories of products, of students, of whatever, you could start counting, and then even if the categories are not ordered, then you can continue counting. So here we have, for example, I sell smartphones and I have smartphone 1, 2, 3, and then over here we have number 4. And this will work for new. Let's say I'm a new laptop and I have my laptop here, and then it starts, and it not only brings the number, but I could also add letters, the references. So using a VLOOKUP, we could also have references for the categories and much more. It's a little bit advanced, but I know you're going to love it. So thank you so much for being here. If you want to download this template and more than 150 that I have in the channel, you can go to the Patreon page. And if not, just subscribe and hit the notifications button, leave a comment or just a thumbs up, and this would work really well also. Thank you so much, especially to my patrons. So let's begin from scratch, like I always like to do. So we can write sheets.new. We'll have a bit of zoom here and then also zoom here. Okay, what we're going to do today is to create a sequence. For example, let's say I have some categories of products. I have some categories of products and I have the product here. So let's say I have in my product, you could either have it here or have it here. It doesn't matter. And let's say I have an iPhone 14. I'm creating a reference sequence number, let's say iPhone 14, and then I have here iPhone 13 Pro Max, whatever. And then I have Pixel phone. Okay, these are my smartphones. Then I have my laptops, and I have a Air Pro, and then I have a Dell, and an Acer Nitro, whatever. And then I will have smartwatches. I don't know, iWatch 9, and then I don't know how this works, second generation, third generation, whatever. And then I will have here another smartphone. This time is Galaxy 10. I want to do a sequence of numbers for these products and categories. We've already learned how to do this with sequence function. Today we're going to use another function that I think can give us more flexibility and we can do more things. So this function is actually a couple of functions, SCAN and LAMBDA functions. I'm not going to explain, this is for another video to explain deeply what lambda is, but lambda is a function where I give some variables to the function. We'll see it in action in a couple of minutes. The nice thing about lambda is that it's the input or the raw material for some more advanced functions, such as map, by call, by row, make array, reduce, and scan. These are the 6 new powerful functions that both Excel and Sheets have since some years ago. We'll dedicate some videos to each of these functions, but today we'll talk about scan and lambda at the same time. Normally I would like to do it first the basic function and then start building on top of it, but scan and lambda work as a whole, so I will do it in a row. Okay, so let's begin. Let's start writing scan. Actually a bit more zoom. Let's start writing scan, and the first thing that scan needs, and we could look here, is the initial value. So scan is perfectly made for doing running totals or doing sequences. So for example, let's say we're going to start a sequence what will be the initial value? Let's start with 0, see how it works, then comma, then which is the range in which I'm going to base my sequence. So let's say it's these products. For now, let's leave it closed, and then we'll open it up and remove the final row, okay? And finally, this is where the tricky part comes in. The last argument needs to be a lambda function. So we're going to write lambda here. And lambda has two parts. The first part are the variables, and the second part is the formula. So this is why this is not the best video if you've never seen lambda. This is not a good introduction for lambda, because the lambda for scan needs some mandatory variables. What scan does, I haven't explained it to you, is that it goes row by row from the range you give it. For example, A2, A10 is the range. So scan is going to iterate through each of the elements. So first iPhone 14, then iPhone 13 Pro, then Pixel, Mac Air Pro, blah, 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 until the end. And what it's going to do is every time it iterates, it's going to store two things. The current value, that is iPhone 14, and the accumulated value. The accumulated value could be whatever, and it depends on this lambda function. So this is why it is important for the lambda to have these two variables. The accumulated, that we could call it as however we want, let's call it accum, and the current value, that we can call it curl, okay? And then is the function. What are we going to do with the function? So the function, in this case, we could do a number of functions, but in this case, I don't even need the current value. I don't need iPhone 14 for now. We're going to use it later. But for now, I only need to use the accumulated and add 1. That's it, very easily. Let's do accum plus 1. Close our lambda, close our scan, hit enter, and it works perfectly. So again, what we did, this is easier to do with the sequence function, but again, this is just the beginning. So it starts with a 0, it goes through each of these rows, and for each row, it will go and add 1 to the accumulated. At the beginning, the accumulated is 0, so we will add 1, it's 1. Then the second one, the accumulated now is 2. This is the nice thing about scan. It stores an accumulation, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a number. It could be a string, for example. I could start adding letters to a string. It doesn't need to be. This opens the possibilities of lambda, because this not only works for numbers, but it could also work for text and many other things. So for now, first option is this. Okay. Then you would say, okay, I like it, but what happens if I want these categories? Let's say I want one sequence of numbers for these categories, one sequence of numbers for these categories, one sequence of numbers for these. For now, I'm going to delete this one, and let's change our formula so it's just up to A9. So how do we do it? So that depending on the category, the number restarts. There are a number of ways of doing it, but again, the nice thing about lambda is that you could use conditionals and you could use many other functions. So what we could do here is an if function that we're going to say that if this category changes, then restart the counter. There are many ways of doing it. I'm going to use another function that I don't normally use, that is called the offset function. Why? Because here in the scan, the references won't work. If I try to select A2, it will damage the function. So I always need to use cur, the current cell. So remember that scan iterates through all of these. So the moment it's evaluating this iteration, it's evaluating A2. Then the second one, it will evaluate or assess A3, and then A4, and then A5. So knowing this, I could use a formula such as indirect, or such as row, or any formula that gives me information from the cell, or such as offset, to use the current cell and move from there. So I could use offset and say, hey, you already know which is the current one, okay? That in our case, let's say is here in 5. You already know which is this one, but I want you to read the category. So offset allows me to move rows to the right, rows to the left, columns to the right, columns to the left. So I'm just going to move one column to the right to see the category. For now, we're going to do something very simple. We're going to say, hey, stay in the row. So 0 rows, don't move the row, and then move 1 column to the right, 1. And we're going to say that if this cell, this one, is called laptops, just bear with me while we do the example. If it's laptops, then you're going to start the counter again. Just put a 1. Let's hit enter, and you can see that it changes, but it always changes to 1 in laptop. So it doesn't work really as I want, but it gives me the hint to how could we do this. How we're going to do this is that we're going to compare this one to the one above it and see if they're the same. So what I'm going to say is that if they change, then please restart. So we're going to use another offset. So let's do offset again, very similar to the current one, but now we're going to move 1 row up. So -1 if we're going to go up, or if we're going to go left, and then comma 1 because it's in the column to the right. If these are not the same, so actually we're going to change this equal for this minus, less than, and greater than. If these are not the same, then start with 1 again. Let's hit enter, and now it works better. So 1, 2, 3, then it starts again, 1, 2, 3, then it starts again, 1, 2. When this is not going to work is the example I had at the beginning. If I put here Galaxy 10, and then I write smartphone, let's say a category that already was before, then, and I change my formula to A10, then it will start over again. This is what I don't want. Okay, so this formula works very nice when I'm sure the categories are in order. For example, for years. So if I have year to do running totals, if I have year 2022, 2023, 2024, and I'm sure that 2024 won't appear again after 2026, this works. Okay, now we're going to see how to address this. But one thing I want to do before that is to make sure that this works for all of my rows and I don't need to be changing this always. So for now, we're going to remove the number and see what happens. And I can see that it starts when it comes empty. Empty, it will evaluate this and compare it to this, and it says, okay, they are different, so we'll start over again. And then it starts adding up, adding up, adding up until infinity, or until my last row. Okay, so how do we remove that? Easy, with another if, or we could use, instead of if, use ifs. Okay, we can replace this if with ifs function. Ifs function are several if or several conditions in one. So I'm just going to change one thing. So ifs always works with pairs of conditions. So the first condition is this. So pairs, condition and value, condition and value. In this case, ifs, this is the first condition and this is the value. I don't have, this other value doesn't have a condition. So this is why there's a little trick in ifs that I need to put here a true, or 1 equals 1, or just a number, whatever. So true works well. Let's hit enter. And now our ifs is working, but I want to add a new formula and a new function. So what I'm going to do here is that after this number 1, comma, and then we're going to say that the next condition will be that current equals to empty. So here there is nothing, then I'm going to put nothing. Let's hit enter, and apparently it worked, but not that well. Actually, I need to put this as a first condition. So we're going to cut this and put it here as my first condition. The important thing when using ifs is that the order of the conditions is very important, because ifs will read from left to right. First, it will read this condition, then it will read this condition. The reason why this was not working is because this was also true. So first, let's see if it's empty, and then we'll see the second function. Let's hit enter, and now it works. Okay, this is what I wanted to do. Let's call this reference. And for now, I have a very nice advanced sequence. However, I want to go one step ahead. And let's call this ordered sequence, so that you could leave, I'm going to leave both formulas, order sequence, and this unordered sequence. Because here it will start again, even if the category already was. So this works very nice where the categories are ordered. Okay, now I need a formula where it doesn't matter if the categories are ordered or not. So let's begin again, just to practice. Let's do a scan. We're going to start with 0, that is our first value. Then we're going to choose the product. It will be A2, and let's leave it open from the beginning. And then we'll deal with that when we need to, comma again. Then we'll start with our lambda. Could be uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter, but in order to, given that our variables will be in lowercase, then I prefer my functions to be in uppercase, just a matter of readability. And as always, when I'm working with a scan, I need to have these two mandatory variables, accumulated and current. And now we're going to do our function. This function will be a bit different. And just to, this is a nice example to see that we don't only need to add up things, but we could do much more complex things. So what I want to do is the following. I want to count how many of these categories are there, but above my variable. So here I want to see how many smartphones are there from A2 up. And when I'm here in A3, from A3 up. So here it will be 1, here it will be 2, here it will be 3. So this will help me do my sequence regardless of the order. So for this, we could use a countif function, count if. Okay, count if needs two things. First, the range which is going to count, and then what is the value that it's going to count. Okay, so let's say that the range for now, let's leave it A2. A2. In this case, it will be A2, A2. Okay. And the value I want to find is smart. Again, let's leave it hard-coded for now and we'll change it later. Let's hit enter, and at least it doesn't have an error, but it's not working as I want it to be. Why? Because of this. Maybe I could do 1A and A2. But still, it's not working. Why? Because it's evaluating A1, A2 all the time. Another thing I could do is just leave this open, but again, it won't work. So first, let's change this to A1, A2, and it's not A, it's B, because we're looking for smartphones in the category column. Okay, so now it counts 1 in all, because I'm always doing B1, B2. Let's leave this open to see what happens. Now it's going to count smartphones, all the smartphones that there is, but this doesn't work for me because I need always to count here to count just 1, here to count 2, here to count 3, and here to count 4. So it doesn't work also. So how could we make this dynamic? Again, as when we did the offset function, we need to be creative and look for functions that make this range dynamic. It's not like in the array formulas, it's different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on B1, could work, but here I need to change this number dynamically. How do I change it dynamically? We could use this function called row and use my current cell. This is an option. Let's see if it works. If I hit enter, it still brings me 0. Why? Because we cannot concatenate reference as easily as this. For this, I need an additional function that is called indirect. When I want to be creative with the references, I need to use them inside an indirect formula. Again, today I'm introducing you to a lot of new formulas, but I hope this opens up your mind to new possibilities and new things you could do with your tables. Let's hit enter. I need to my indirect. First, I'm going to put the characteristic of indirect is that I need to, it receives a string. This is why it will work with indirect, because I'm creating a string inside the indirect function. Okay, now let's hit enter again. Let me see, I forgot to close. You need to be very careful with the parentheses. So here, first I'm closing the row current, and then I need to close the indirect before I continue with my scan. So I'm going to delete this red one, and now I'm getting somewhere. I have the 1, 2, 3, but now I have a problem here because it's starting at 3. Why? Because I have this hard-coded as smartphones. So I could use a similar formula to what we used before, that is the offset formula. So I could say, let's do offset. Let's offset our current cell. Are we going to offset it 0 rows and 1 column to the right? Let's close it and let's see. And it's working. 1, 2, 3, then laptops 1, 2, 3, smartwatch 1, 2, then smartphones. It reads the smartphones that were already here, and I will give it 4. Okay, the only thing I don't like is that this is 0, but let's try it again. Let's put another smartwatch. Let's see, there's a Google smartwatch. I don't know. Let's call this smartphone a smartwatch, and now it's number 3. This is really, really cool. Okay, now I need to remove the 0. So I could remove it with an if, very similar to what we did before. So here, before my countif, I could do an if. And very easily, if current is empty, then let's leave it empty. If not, do the countif. Now let's try to add letters. Let's say you want to do this as references. So we want to do ref 1. So I could just, here, my countif, inside quotation marks, put reference, and then ampersand, and that's it. Very easily, and you don't need to use array formulas as you did before. However, here I'm repeating my references, reference 1 and reference 1 and reference 1. Maybe I want to do I have here, I could have code, category code. So here will be a smartphone, and laptop will be LT, and smartwatch will be SW, and smartphone SP, and smartwatch SW. Okay, so what I could do instead of doing the ref, easier still, is that we're just going to do, again, use the offset. So use offset with the current one. I hope that this helps you understand the logic of SCAN and LAMBDA doing these advanced examples. So we're going to stay in the same row and move 2 columns to the right, and that's it. And now we have it SP1, SP2, SP3, LT1, LT2, LT3. We could even go further. Maybe we have our references here. And let's do this. Let's copy it here. Category, and here is the code. And we could do maybe a VLOOKUP. So instead of having the offset with the cat code, we could do it with the category and use this offset inside a VLOOKUP function. VLOOKUP or an XLOOKUP. And then here we're going to use to look for smartphones. We're going to look for them here in this table. So here I'm showing you that you could also use references like you do normally in your formulas. And then we're going to look for it in the second column and leave the 0 as always in VLOOKUP. There is some VLOOKUP videos in the channel if you don't know this function really well. Let's do enter, and it's the same, and we can now remove the category code and it works. So it isn't a complex formula, but not as complex as one as we've done in past videos. I think this works really nice, and I hope you liked it. I hope it works for you. And as always, if you like this, you just hit subscribe, hit on the little bell to receive notifications when a new video is published. You can comment or just give it a thumbs up. And if you want to go to the next level, you go to the Patreon page, where you can download the templates, ask me anything. Hopefully very soon you'll find courses and many other things for you to master Google Sheets, Google Apps Script, Google Forms, and some of the other productivity Google tools. Thank you so much, especially to my patrons, and see you next time.